It was better on TV anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly,
It was good.
You get
Oh,
see
yeah,
everything.
how could you be? Depending upon how they do with the vortex situation next year, they could be great games. It doesn't matter. They are so open to talent. So does Texas, and you open with them. Having, you mentioned what they do. See, that's Memorial or Labor Day weekend. You'll be doing the same thing.
My Wi-Fi's not. I mean, we live out in the country, so we have issues all the time. And Spectrum is coming down our road, so we're so excited.
You know, we were having that issue, so we bought Starlink.
Well, we did Starlink and we had like really no luck, and our yard is pretty open. Danny got up on the top of the roof. And
Yeah.
we put it there.
Yeah, I put ours up on the top of the roof, and it's been great.
Has it been
Yeah.
good? That's what everybody said. Even AT&T guy told us get Starlink, so we did. And then Danny we left it on the ground, so I could get it. There were some things you could get, but Danny.
Yeah, I put it up on the roof, and with the app you can kind of walk around and see where you get the best. So, and I bought that. I have another like roof mount if you guys want it.
Well, we're gonna try Spectrum because they came the other day to.
But it doesn't drill into the roof. It's got weights on it, and
Oh,
it sits on top of the roof. Yeah, so I have one,
Okay.
and you can have it because I don't need
Let's
it.
see how Spectrum works because we're gonna try
I
that.
tried to give it to Hiscox because I knew he was gonna. He already bought one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, everybody talked about how good it was, and probably Danny has like this much patience sometimes, and so I'd probably if you had some.
And what I did is
Did you install it yourself?
Yeah. And then I bought a second receiver and put it in. So I have one like right where it comes into the house, and then one in the kitchen, and it spreads the signal farther. So I'm thinking about maybe getting even another one because it'll just make it that much
Do you
faster.
use it for your TV too?
Hmm. We use it for everything.
What's your monthly bill?
It's like $120 a month. Hmm. Yeah, the satellite was like $500. The roof mount was, I don't know.
I'd like to bring the meeting
$75,
to
something like
order.
that.
If we could stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Beth, roll call, please. Here.
Miss McCaver, can you use your microphone, please?
Sorry about that. Mr. Berman,
Still here.
Mr. Manfredi,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller just texted and she's walking in. Mrs. Stone? Here. And Mr. Wadsworth?
Here.
I need a first and a second for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
A second.
Dan, Brian, any discussion? Beth will call, please.
Mr. Berman,
Yes.
Mr. Manfredi,
Yes.
Mrs. Stone,
Yes.
and Mr. Wadsworth.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to hold public comment till after we do our presentation. Typically, we do it before, but tonight we'll do it after. So instead of having public comment before, it'll be after. So we are to new business. And that is the discussion of future tax levies, tax implications, additional revenue sources of the district. So John and Beth, take it away.
All right, thank you. Mrs. McCaffrey and I worked on this presentation for you. We just wanted to give a financial overview and a path forward. We will reference challenges, achievements, and solutions in this presentation. And to start, we're going to go back to 2017 and what our journey has been since 2017. We picked 2017 because that was the year that I got here. And when I got here, Mrs. McCaffrey and I sat down. And she asked me what my vision for instruction for the district was so that she could match the finances for the district with our vision for instruction so we could try to put the best instructional program together and make sure that we could afford that instructional program. And we built that at the time largely around bringing in some additional revenues through open enrollment because open enrollment was funded in such a way that if you could get extra students that you would see a benefit from it. So if you look at this chart, you'll be able to see that in 2017, we were actually losing more than we were gaining in terms of open enrollment. We were losing $468,000 a year because more kids were leaving us than were coming. So at that time, we started to make some strategic improvements to attract and retain students. We kind of revived the Prime Committee. We started to increase the hands-on learning aspect of what we were doing. We started to do more direct advertising to families, both in district and that were open enrolled out. And then in 2018, you can see we were still losing more than we were gaining, but we were kind of making some ground. In 2019, then we started actually gaining more than we were losing. We were gaining some momentum. At that point, our bond issue had passed. We knew that we were going to be building the new facility. There was a lot of excitement. And then in 2020, we started seeing significant increases. And in 2021, we were at about $660,000 more that we were bringing in than we were losing because of open enrollment. And so our business model was working well. I think we would have been great at the time. However, then in 2022, the state introduced a new funding formula. And that funding formula essentially eliminated the open enrollment incentive. So they didn't take the money away that we had gained through open enrollment, but they capped it at that. So we were not going to get any more additional funding due to open enrollment, which meant that every additional open enrollment we took, it was just going to kind of lessen the impact of that funding. At the same time that open enrollment formula was changed, vouchers started to take effect. And in the beginning, vouchers weren't affecting us as much. In 2022, we were only losing about 5 vouchers. And then in 2023, 6. And then that jumped up to 69 last year. And the effect of the thing that the vouchers, we've never been afraid of competition in the district. In fact, we enjoy competition. We believe in a meritocracy. We think that we should compete. The problem is that the vouchers only benefit if you choose to go to a private, a charter, or a non-public school. Families that were choosing to come to us from another public or even a private, we weren't seeing that same benefit. So we're not getting that amount of funding that people that go for the voucher are getting. So they're getting at the high school level about $8,500 a student for the voucher, whereas ours is just being calculated in like a regular enrollment. We're not getting that extra bump. So that hurt us in terms of we no longer see that benefit. So if you think of this in terms of the analogy of a game. So I say, here we are at Great Lakes Chiefs Stadium. We're getting ready to have this awesome contest. We're going to go out to our field and we're going to play this game. And it's going to be the Berkshire against whatever school wants to battle us in terms of fighting over vouchers. But the problem is the way the rules are applied. We're going to draw this big blue line down the middle because the privates, parochials, and charters, they only have to play on a 50-yard field because there's little to no regulations. There's no oversight. There's no standardized testing requirement, none of those things. But, Berkshire and or all public schools, we're forced to compete on a 100-yard field because we do have all that oversight, all those regulations. So the problem is, we're put in this position to compete, but we have to play on the 100-yard field. They get to play on a 50-yard field. And then everyone wants to compare our score at the end of the game to act like that was some kind of a meaningful competition. And even so, we're still competing fairly well, even with that in mind. So just when people say, this is a choice, they're honoring parent choice when that choice becomes private. But if that choice is another public, then it's meaningless because we don't get the same effect that the privates get. So we're going to talk about some of our key financial challenges. The biggest of all was that the state decided to, blow up our business model when they took the open enrollment incentive away. So right off the bat, the open enrollment incentive is taken away. That incentive is not taken away from anyone who wants to accept a voucher. On top of that, we'll take a little piece away from us because we had a loss of utility revenue. There's nearly $1 million in delinquent public utility that hasn't been collected. And that's public utility that should have come to us, that we were counting on, that we didn't get because it wasn't ever collected. And I don't think we've ever been given a really good explanation as to why it's not being collected. We'll take another little chunk away from the district because even though the privates, parochials, and charters get this voucher now, we still have to provide services to the privates, parochials, and charters. We have to provide their transportation, and we have to provide auxiliary services to them. If they need a school psych, we have to send a school psych to service kids there. They get a portion of our federal funding. So even though they're getting that full voucher that we're not getting, we still have to provide those services. So that's another little chunk taken. We'll take another little chunk away because of the preschool mandates. And if there's a special ed preschooler, we're completely responsible for the education or the cost to educate those children, but there's no state funding that accompanies preschool. We'll take another little chunk away from the district because we've got court place students. And every year we have 2 to 4 students who, one quick example, we had a student who was on probation, violated their probation, and the courts placed them out of state in a residential treatment. And the district we don't have any choice in where that is, and we don't have any choice in how much that costs, but we have to pay for the educational portion of that because we are the residential public school. So those are costs that it's really hard to plan for. Because we have no control over that. We take another little chunk away from the district because we have curricular mandates from the state. The state decides, okay, everyone must teach the science of reading. So, whether you had this curriculum or not, now you got to pay. $300. I think we spent $350,000 on the science of reading curriculum that we implemented, not to mention the training and the time and the other things that go along with that. And then we'll take another chunk away because of the overregulation and the amount of reporting, compliance issues, audits, licensure, excessive standardized testing, all of which leads to resource drain for the district and increased stress. So essentially what we're doing here is, with what we have left of the Badger here, we're using those resources to provide the highest quality educational program that we can provide. And I think not a lot of people in the public understand all the little different pieces that are taken away before we can start to provide the program that we want to provide. But what I will say is we have demonstrated strong stewardship of the taxpayer dollars. The biggest thing I can point out right away is that we worked with the USDA to build this new school. We are the only school in the state of Ohio that has ever done that. And what that did is it allowed us to fund the school through the USDA instead of going out and getting on the bond market and getting legal counsel involved. And I know that we talked about this a lot during the bond issue campaign, but that saved our taxpayers just over $4 million over the life of the loan. So in addition to that, because we financed with the USDA, that gave us the capability to then refinance, which we wouldn't have been able to do had we gone the traditional bond route. So these are things that we're thinking of that not a lot of other people are thinking of. In fact, no other schools have ever done. So in 2022, before we had even moved into this building, we refinanced that levy. So our voters passed 3.6 mils to build this building. And then we refinanced, and that dropped their millage rate to 3.49. And the next year it dropped to 2.6, and now it's collecting at 2.5. So a demonstrated fiscal responsibility that how many other school districts can say we built a new building, and before we even moved in, we started showing efficiencies that saved money to the taxpayers. Now, maybe we didn't do a really good job of informing everybody what we were doing, but we were being fiscally responsible and prudent with the funds that we were given. Another example is if we look at ending cash balances for all, these are all the districts in Geauga County. This is Berkshire right here. We have never had a high ending cash balance because we've always spent what we needed to spend, and we've never tried to hoard money or save. We've kept it the same. You can see we're kind of the same here. Beth does a really good job at trying to anticipate what expenses we're going to have and what revenues we have, and we stay the same. We're not going up and down trying to do the different things that a lot of other that you see happen in a lot of other places. So there's some demonstrated stewardship of taxpayer dollars. We're doing everything we can to give the best educational program we can at the lowest price. And speaking of best educational program, I want to talk about some successes that we should celebrate, because we have seen increased student services here to deal with students' mental health issues, things like that. We've had increased hands-on learning opportunities, increased career education opportunities. There's some pictures of our diesel tech program. We also have the medical assisting program. We have our Badger Lab vocational program where we've got students working in 32 different businesses within the county, all at the same time showing increasing test score as well. So, do we have the best test scores in the county? No, but they are consistently increasing as we're also increasing all these other services and adding to a deep program of studies at our high school. So offering our kids the hands-on career education that they need while improving and increasing test scores every year. We've gone from a 3-star to a 3.5-star to this year we were a 4-star district on the state report card. And you've seen that we've had increasing numbers of AP scholars. We've had College Credit Plus on the rise. So we're not just focusing on one area. We're growing all areas and offering all kinds of things to students. And that's demonstration that the model that we have in place is working. So we really want to hold on to that model, do everything we can to keep it, and continue to increase that achievement on the state report card while also increasing the number of workforce development programs that we have. And that doesn't even speak to our newest one that we've started with Preston, which is going to provide even more opportunities for our students here in the future. So that brings us to where we are now. This was our Badger that we talked about with all those different little chips taken off of us. But we recently lost another little piece of the Badger. with the rejection of the permanent improvement levy, which will put more strain on our general fund because of the lack of that revenue. We could offset some things that now will have to be paid for out of the general fund. There are also rising costs, and then frankly, we're not sure what external factors are going to influence school funding. If you've been keeping up with the recent studies, we've got some of our state legislators saying that they feel like the funding formula, which the effects of which don't benefit us greatly. I think they benefit some other districts a little better, but now they're saying that may be unsustainable as well. So just another kind of pickle we've put ourselves in. So if we look at our current 5-year forecast, we're looking at this red box shows the amount we're spending versus the amount we're bringing in. And you can see these are negative numbers. So we're deficit spending, which is not uncommon for school districts. And that's when you start to see that, then you start to look for grants or other things to offset those things, which we do frequently. But the alarming number is now without that permanent improvement levy, we can't offset some of those costs of the general fund. So you see in years 4 and 5, we're looking at fund balances. So we can't have a general fund negative balance, because then we can't operate. So things will have to happen. Either we'll have to find some additional revenues, or we'll have to completely gut the model, which has shown great success for us, which is something we want to try to avoid if at all possible. When we start planning for the future, we'll talk to you about some revenue generating ideas or things that we have in the works that we're already doing. One is the new building that we're building out back for preschool. And some people might think, well, if you're in a financial strain, how can you afford to build a new building? Well, a few months ago when we were making this decision, we showed that the cost for no action was going to be over $1 million, because without that building, we're not going to be able to serve these different student populations that we have to serve. We have to outplace them in other programs, which is going to cost us over $1 million. To build that new facility for the first 10 years is going to be $981,000. And then after that, $691,000. So building the new facility and being able to educate those students here in-house without sending them out was going to save money. And then in addition to that, if we fully utilize that facility, we could bring in some additional revenues upward of $771,000 a year if we can fill all the spots. So that building is an investment in our future and will help us in the future. Another thing we've done is we've done a lot of grant writing. We brought on a grant writer this year who, and that's another thing people would say, well, why did you hire a person to write grants if you're in financial trouble? That person has brought in triple their salary in grants already. And we're just about halfway through the school year. And in the past, Beth and I were doing as many grants as we could while we were trying to do the other things we have to do, but we weren't able to focus on that. And so that focus on those grants really helps to kind of target those areas where we need to make up for some funding. So we're getting state, federal, and private grants, and then we get other donations in as well. But we're able to funnel that through one person who can make sure that we're focusing those efforts where they need to be focused. So as we plan for the future, here the only other ways to bring in revenue aside from what we just talked about with the new building and the grants are local property tax levies. I mean, the options that are available to us are operating funds, an operating levy, which is funding day-to-day operations like salaries, utilities, supplies, permanent improvement levy, which is restricted to capital improvements, emergency levies, which is a fixed dollar amount over a set period of time. Another type of levy is an income tax levy. It could be either earned income tax or traditional income. We currently do have a 1% earned income tax levy. which is beneficial to retirees and seniors because it's only taxed on earned income and retirement doesn't count in that. And the other benefit to an income tax levy is everyone participates, and it's based on your income level. So it's not like only property owners are paying for the schools. Everyone's paying, a little bit. The other option is an inside millage transfer, which occurs when a taxing authority, such as a school board, reallocates inside millage for one purpose, such as operating expenses, to another, such as a permanent improvement or debt services. So those are options that we have available to us for additional revenue. The options as we see it, when Beth and I sat down to see what we would need, if we were to run an operating levy, we would probably need to ask for about a 4.9 mil operating levy to get us out of this fund deficit that we're looking at in 5 years. If we were to ask for an additional income tax, it would be in the neighborhood of 0.5% additional earned income tax, which would generate a little bit less than the amount of 4.9 mils would generate in a levy. If we were to ask for a permanent improvement levy, it would be about 2.5 mils, and that wouldn't completely get us out of this debt, but it would allow us to shift enough expenses from the general fund to the permanent improvement fund that we could really attack that deficit and operate, as we have been. And then if we were to do an inside millage transfer, that would also be about 2.5 mils from the general to the permanent improvement fund. So what does this mean for the taxpayer? A 4.9 mil operating levy in this district would equate to $171.50 per $100,000 of market value. A 0.5% earned income tax would be about $250 per $50,000 of earned income. A 2.5 mil permanent improvement levy would be about $87.50 per $100,000 of market value. And the inside millage transfer at 2.5 would be the same, about $87.50 for $100,000 of market value. Now, as Beth and I talk, it seems like options 3 and 4 are really the only realistic options that we think would be possible or potential. So we went ahead and decided to show kind of what we could do with a new 2.5 mil levy or inside mill. And so there are certain things that we could pay for. So anything with a life of 5 years or more, like we're still paying on the athletic facility, the stadium behind us, and we're paying interest on that. So that could come out of that. The lease for the new building for pre-K could come out of that. We have an OFCC transfer that we're required to make every year, which is supposed to go to potential big maintenance we need down the road. We could pull makerspace equipment, career tech equipment, Chromebooks, buses, all out of that permanent improvement fund. It would be really no different than we had operated in the past when we had the permanent improvement levy. That's why we were always able to kind of make that work. So we have to be able to collaborate for a sustainable future here. I'll go back to, this was our 5-year forecast. We talked about the deficit spending and the being in a negative fund balance. If we pass the 2.5 mil permanent improvement levy, or if we transferred 2.5 of our inside mills into the permanent improvement fund, our new 5-year forecast would look like this. You'll see we're still deficit spending, which we could target. But if you notice, year 4, we are no longer in a fund balance, and year 5, that fund balance is divided by 4, basically. So we could really target with grants these deficit spending years, and everything we can do to knock this down has exponential impact on the future. So we feel like with that 2.5 mils, we could really get out of this issue, be able to continue to run the model that we're running and provide the benefits that we're providing. Because what we're doing is we're trying to provide the best we can for our youngest students, for our middle students, and for our oldest students. And so that's what we're collaborating for. That's the investment that we're trying to protect, to make sure that we can keep doing great things for all these kids in our system. With that, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions that you may have for us.
John, can you go back to the balance sheet for a second? Does that one include funds from the preschool?
No, funds from the preschool. Well, some.
It includes some.
Some funds from the preschool, but not a fully realized fund from the preschool. So yeah, so anything additional we can bring in from the preschool and from grants would knock that number down.
Gotcha.
How many mills was the PI levy that got voted down collecting for us?
It was a 2.5 mil levy initially. It was collecting at under 1 mil, so a point, Beth.
Yes, we
correct me,
don't know
0.8
what it would
maybe?
have collected at this year, but just under 1 mil.
Just under one.
What is the average cost for a preschool student? I know there's several different layers.
Yeah,
there.
preschool will vary depending on the severity of the disability. So if it's a non-disabled preschooler, we really don't pay for that. That's a tuition base, so parents pay tuition for that. But if we had to place a preschooler, it could be between $44,000 and $140,000, depending on the severity of the special need.
And how do we, I mean, it doesn't seem like there would be a way to really plan or budget for that. It's kind of the year before you can kind of get an idea, but
Yeah, we try. So that's crept up on us a couple of years ago because we didn't have very many, and then all of a sudden there was an explosion. So you do the best you can, like looking at the year before or a couple of years before to see if there are any trends. We have a decent handle on it now, but it's still, every year it seems like we get a couple of either move-ins or, people find us and, that. So we just do the best we can to.
And to
It's
be
hard,
clear,
it's hard to plan for, basically.
the state contributes nothing to that, correct?
The state will contribute a little bit to the special needs preschoolers, but not, they don't fund it much at all.
How does that impact going into the future? Like these kids that are starting here in preschool, how does that impact us when they're in 2nd grade and 5th grade? And
Yeah, the longer we can have them, the better,
Okay.
because they can. So when we get them in preschool, then we are in control of kind of what they're learning, so that when they roll into kindergarten, they're coming in kind of on a level playing field with other kindergartners coming in.
what about financially? Because those kids would still need special services as they go through.
Yeah,
school.
if they're our district resident, they're going to get special services, but we control that a little bit easier in K-12 because we have a bigger K-12 staff already, and we have those programs. We've been bringing our special needs programs in-house more and more, because the more we can do here, it's more efficient. We can run the programs more efficiently than if we send those out to outside programs. So we like to keep our kids here as much as we can. And then once you have so many, like once we were at the point where we had 8 or more, it just made more sense to have our staff run the program, because at that point you're sending out more than you're bringing in, and you're sending them.
So would you say, from 2017, when you got here, till today, we send very few special needs kids outside the district unless they need really, really special services? Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, it's a very severe case or a court placement that puts them out of the district now. We do our best to not outplace students when we don't have to.
So we built this since you've been here to be able to have our kids stay home. And the other thing about not transporting them away is that they're actually getting education right away instead of being in a van or in a bus being moved from here to there. The second part of that is our tech programs and the more vocational that we're doing. By offering those programs, our kids are in a van or bus less or not at all, and they're getting more substantial training or learning because we keep them at home.
Yeah, it's easier for them to take the high school courses as well, because right now, our diesel program is at the old board office. Next year, it'll be at the ODOT facility across from Preston. So that's not very far away. They're able to get there and back and able to take more classes. When the students go to Auburn, it's a 45-minute bus ride or a 35-minute car ride. So you're basically an hour plus that's an hour plus in the car that they couldn't take advantage of a class here because of the travel time.
So if we wanted to put another, I mean, we have to do something. So if we went with the route of trying for the third time to get the PI levy passed, how soon can we get that on the ballot legally? And what kind of impact does the timing of that have on our outlook?
Yeah, at this point, I think November is the soonest we can get it on the ballot. Beth, you correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And so what that uncertainty, so there's the uncertainty of, is it going to pass? And then there's, if it passes in November, Beth, when would it start collecting if it passed in November?
So if it passed in November, we would collect in 26. If it didn't pass, we would, and we kept trying, we wouldn't see anything till 27.
So there's risk there, but if it did pass, that would be great. We would have to make some cuts, but they would be cuts that we could manage because we would collect again in 26. But if it didn't pass, it would put us in a position where we don't have a whole lot of choice but to start making significant cuts. And we do our best to save the classroom from any of that, but at a certain point, when you have to make up $4 million, it's going to touch that, eventually.
Then on the other side, if the inside millage was used, how quickly do we get that? Or does that come about?
So if you voted to have inside millage shifted, that would also take place in 26, but it would be a guaranteed thing. I think the scariest thing about our forecast right now, too, is with the legislature talking about potentially not funding the formula. That's another unknown that, we just don't know how to forecast for that, how to predict for that. You have new legislators coming in and they're saying that this formula that they stuck us with is not sustainable. So what does that mean? We don't know. It's just like with the public utility tax. We were counting on almost $1 million from the Orwell-Trumbull pipeline, and it just went away. And now it's, the valuations went away, and now we have this almost $1 million delinquency that, we've asked repeatedly, what's going on? And we're not getting answers from the county. So that's very frustrating, because $1 million could do a lot for this forecast. But the last that we were told, and this is all the schools in Geauga County are affected by this, don't count on that money. So, when you have that in your forecast and you're collecting 5 years out and suddenly it drops off, that's a big change, And so we scramble and try and make it up someplace else.
how do we compare to other schools in the county as far as staff, administrator, teacher ratio?
I'm not 100% sure about the county. I know statewide that typically, building level administration is about 1 to every 200 students. So if you look at the high school, we have 435 students. We have 2 building administrators, so we're right around the average. At the middle school, we have about 435 students, and we have 2 administrators. And at the elementary school, we have about 515, I think, students, and we have 1 building level administrator. So we're a little bit lower at the elementary. We're about average at the middle and high school.
And to your point, what we're doing is working. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
the very sad thing about.
And the thing
If we
about
did cut,
the
that would be-
administrators, I mean, I know everybody jumps right away to, get rid of those building administrators, but they provide a direct line of support to the classroom teachers, because if you don't have an assistant principal to handle some of the issues that teachers face in classrooms, then they're left to deal with those issues in the classroom while they're also trying to teach. So in terms of, who's on the chopping block first, yes, probably district level administrators, then, building level in terms of assistant principal, before we would ever get to the classroom. But just realize that the loss of those also puts a strain on the classroom teacher because they have less support.
Especially when we have rock star administrators like we do, who are just doing amazing things for the district and getting outstanding results and forming good bonds with the kids.
Yeah,
That
I
would
think
be
the
a
proof's
shame.
in the pudding. The model that we have is producing results on all of our metrics. It's not, and we really thought hands-on, learning that help kids through workforce development, and that's really where the state wants schools to go. And we're showing massive improvements there, but we're also showing those incremental improvements on the report card and the other things. So it's a model that's working. And we get calls from other districts to ask how we're doing it, what we're doing. And that's why I think it's a model that we want to protect if we can protect it. And, if we can't protect that model, then eventually something's going to give, either the workforce development or the report card, or heaven forbid, the program in general. But when you have a proven working model, you want to do everything you can to continue to support that model.
When you look at having 5 principals and assistant principals total for 1,400 children, you have 280 children per administrator. And you can't say that our elementary doesn't get help from our middle school, because they do. Because we're in this same building, am I wrong by saying that these principals and assistant principals are commingling and working with each other? Right?
Yeah, they're helping each other with lunch duties and they're working together they work together frequently. And we have weekly administrative team meetings where they all talk about what their needs are, and they all kind of jump in and help each other where it's needed. So.
And that's why we built the model of having one building, and so they can help each other. And it isn't the assistant and high school principal only take care of 9 through 12, because I know that not to be the case. They're working with Mandy, or they're working with Heather to help. And I mean, we've seen that happen. So for the public, our administrators all work together. And that really goes for anybody that we have on our team. They're commingling and working with every group, because that's why we wanted one building, so that we didn't have to have duplicates of anything, because the way we used to have it with Ledgemont, Burton Elementary, and then the old building, I mean, we had to have separate people because they were in separate buildings. We don't have that anymore. Accurate? Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to say something too, that you don't realize as a public the expenses and all the things that have to come out of a school's budget. Because I was a teacher for 30 years and I didn't realize and I used to come to board meetings and all that other kind of stuff as a community member, as a teacher, but so much stuff comes out that we don't even realize what comes out of the budget that we think is just for education. Because everything, and now you look at, when John put all those pieces together, and now that the state's starting to take money through the voucher system out of that big fund, there's less and less for us to have. And we as a community then have to go to these levies that nobody wants just to support our schools the way we want to. And it's really quite complicated and so hard, but we all as board members want the best for your children and our children. And that's where decisions become so hard to make sometimes.
I think our problem is everybody who is watching this presentation or joining us online or care to ask questions about this are the ones that support us and the progress we've made with this school and its system, and most of them, 99% of them, love what we're doing. The problem is there's a large majority of people out there that don't take the time or don't care to take the time to learn about what we're doing and see the progress we're making. They only see dollars and cents. So I think really it comes down to the question, it's obviously something that we have to change, and whether that comes from a levy or an inside millage, that's really our choice, right? That we need to get funds, and I think I agree with you in your presentation, those are the only two options that we have, is either having voters vote on it or transfer inside millage. So I think the $1 million question is, can we put all of our effort in to pass a levy, or do we think that's going to fail no matter what? If we can't pass a renewal PI levy that was collecting at less than half of what we are now going to propose, even though I think the economy's turning and it's going to be a little easier out there, do we have what it takes with information and data and energy and time and campaigning and reach enough people to turn the tide to have a levy go through? I think that's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I think it's really easy for people to make the claim that the school wastes money, but we are the most regulated entity that I mean, everything we do is audited, and you don't win Auditor of the State awards every year by wasting money or not being fiscally responsible. And that's the only thing I would point back to people who really don't know how we do things, but just assume that they know how revenues are given, or how things, we wouldn't. Every year that Beth has been the treasurer, she's been in the top 1%, and essentially this district then, because of Beth's work, has been in the top 1% of all districts in the state in terms of fiscal responsibility. So if we're mismanaging things, then 99% of the state of Ohio's public school districts are really mismanaging things.
Yeah, this to the public, this is not an easy decision for any of us, and we can't kick this can down the road. Bad things will happen, as we have seen in the past. But so again, like what Dan said, I think we have to weigh the option of, are we going to put that effort into that and try to pass that, Or do we do an inside millage transfer because we cannot depend on the county to collect $1 million that we're due, and we can't depend on the state to have a fair funding model for the schools. And our community is very important. And I think the vast majority of the people in our community would agree that, you know, the school is the hub of the community, and your real estate value depends on how well the schools do. So to the general public, this is not an easy decision for us to make.
The state, and we're talking specifically, Matt Huffman put out a video where they want to cut $650 million of funding to public education. Now, in quick numbers, the state has about 620 public schools, but it's not based upon the size of those schools, their range in size. That would affect us approximately $500,000 right away. They make another cut, then you're going to cut obviously, if you're cutting 650 million out, they're going to be taking from every single district. That's the only way they can make that kind of cut. And he is adamant saying that he wants to do it. We have to protect our investment and our kids and our district. We have to protect it because the people in Columbus are not going to protect us. They've made that clear that the voucher program is staying. And we didn't even comment on this, but the 69 vouchers that are paid out are kids that were already in other schools. They weren't in our school and left. They already were in those schools. Now it's just that the money followed them to those schools. I don't knock that program. I'm not opposed to the program. I'm just not happy that if they're going to cut $650 out of the budget, they're going to hurt us then. And that's hurting our kids.
If they would simply make that equitable and say, then open enrollment should count as a voucher because that's a choice. Right. If they made that same commitment to the public school, then now that wouldn't be great. That would be good for Berkshire because we're winning the open enrollment war. Mm-hmm. That might not be good for some other districts who are losing open enrollment. But if you want real competition, have us play on an equal size playing field.
Exactly.
And our goal is to educate the children that walk through the doors. We don't look at their address. We don't ask them who their parents are. Our obligation is to educate those children. And I'm a firm believer that no matter where these kids come from, they're our kids when they walk through that door. And I want them here if they want to be here. So
what are next steps, Beth?
Well, I don't know if you put off public comment, John. I don't know if you want to jump that to now or.
This is the time if we're going to do it, unless we can continue to talk, obviously, even after public comments. Mm-hmm. But I delayed, for those of you who weren't here, public participation usually happens at the beginning of the meeting. I chose to do it after we had our presentation. So if there's anyone that has any comments, questions, now's the time to ask you. Come up to the microphone, address the board, and all we ask is that, you're addressing us and asking the question if you have any questions or comments. Okay. Now back to your question.
Yeah, what are next steps? Procedure.
So if you decide to put the PI levy back on, we would have 2 motions to pass, and then it would go on, we'd file it with the Board of Elections. It would go on the November ballot. If you decided to shift millage, from general fund to the permanent improvement fund. We would need to advertise twice, and there's some timing on the advertisement. So I think we would have to advertise like this, if you wanted to do it in February, we would advertise this Friday and then the following Thursday, and then you're required by law to have a public hearing. You're required by law to notify the county auditor. And then, so we would probably have to push our board meeting back an hour, do a hearing on the 10th, which would be our next board meeting. And then once the public hearing was over, you would go into regular session and then have it be part of regular business.
Are we making a motion tonight? Do we need to make a motion tonight that where we're headed?
I need marching orders as to how to proceed. So either way, I think you need to either make a motion for me to prepare resolutions, either issue for next board meeting.
Can we have the public session and talk about the inside millage transfer and then still have enough time if after that we vote on it and it doesn't pass, still have enough time to put the PI levy on for the fall? So discuss the
Yes.
inside millage transfer and then.
Yes, you
yeah.
would have enough time to do that. So are you saying if you had a public hearing and then you said, okay, yes, you would.
Okay.
So you're saying we're not going to make a motion tonight?
She's saying we need to tell her to.
You have to
advertise.
give Beth marching orders one way or the other. And I think, Brian, your question was, can we start you down the road of the inside millage transfer? And then if after the hearing we decide we don't want to do that, do we still have time to make the resolution for the permanent improvement levy? Was that your question?
Correct.
Yeah. And so, yes, there is time for that. So I guess the board, probably a motion is the best way to do it, because then you're going to have a vote on, you're not voting on what you're doing, you're just voting on what you're asking Beth to do next.
So really, we're voting if we want a public hearing or not, is what it comes down to.
Correct.
Right?
To discuss, yeah, the inside.
We're voting on if we want a public hearing.
Okay.
I have a question here too, that why can we do this inside millage? What kind of things tell us that this is acceptable? What kind of laws or statements or?
So the inside millage transfer is allowable by law. It's part of the Ohio Revised Code. And it does affect the 20 mil floor, and the 20 mil floor is part of the Ohio Constitution.
So the Ohio Constitution says that a school district is constitutionally required to collect 20 mills to support a free, appropriate public education. It just so happens in our district, we haven't passed any operating levies in so long that we are at the 20 mil floor. So essentially, if we transfer the 2.5 mils from the general fund into the permanent improvement fund, it drops us below the 20 mil floor. So taxes would increase to raise us to the 20 mil floor. So just so we're clear, if you vote to do a millage transfer, it will increase taxes.
Well, all four of the choices.
All four of the
increase
choices will
taxes.
increase taxes.
We need to get money from somewhere. So have other schools in our area gone that route in the last?
There are other schools in the county that have transferred inside millage, but they were not at the 20 mil floor like we are. So
Okay.
you can transfer inside millage. If you're not at the 20 mil floor, it doesn't affect taxpayers.
Yeah.
But if you're at the 20 mil floor, then it does affect taxpayers.
Okay.
So no one else has been at the 20 mil floor when they've done it in this county. Other places in the state have, but not in the county.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
So when we have this public hearing, will we then be voting that night, or will we have time
Probably-
to digest the public comments.
So
and-
the hearing cannot be part of a regular board meeting. So I think we would push back the regular board meeting till at least 7.
Okay.
And then hear from the public. And then I would have motions probably ready for all the different options. And then you would pass whatever going forward.
It's not required to have the vote that same day. I mean, you could say, I want to wait till March. I mean, it all depends on how fast, how quickly you want to proceed.
It's just a huge, it's a huge
Mhm.
decision that none of us want to be in this position. I mean, it's just an absolute shame that, the levy failed twice when it had been in place since 1989 and we were going along great. And it's just a beyond disappointing outcome. That being said, this is a very big decision on how we recoup that money. And so I guess we can decide that night, if we feel ready to take action or if we want to postpone it a few
And-
weeks.
For clarity, Beth, I want to ask the question, and I know I've asked it before, but I want it publicly said. If there was a change in the way the state funded the schools, and I mean, I'm not saying they're going to fund it in a positive way and things go away, but if that did in fact happen, we are not obligated to collect that money, even if it passes. We can push it back and not collect it. Am I correct?
Oh, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I want to make that clear that we're talking about making this district solid like we always have. If you go back through all the board members that ever sat here, this district was always frugal and always was funded. I don't care how far back you go, we can name names back 30, 40 years. That was how this district operated. We still operate that way today. I mean, I could talk about Beth receiving the highest award in the state for being the best treasurer in the Northeast Ohio, voted on by her peers. So we know we're a frugal, well-operated district. That's how we operate. But we have to fund it so our kids get the education they deserve and we're not in the red. That's it. So, Beth, do you want us to vote tonight so that you could put a resolution together?
Yes, so if you would like to hold a public hearing prior to our board meeting on February 10th, I just wrote up a quick motion. Motion to authorize the treasurer to take the necessary steps to hold a public hearing to potentially shift inside millage on February 10th, 2025 at 6 p.m.
And for clarity purposes, when we're voting affirmative or not, we are not voting that we're passing it. We're voting so that you can gather the information,
Do the advertisements and. have
the
them-
advertisement and the information. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Um,
Any other comments or questions by the board? Beth, read that one more time, please.
A motion to authorize the treasurer to take the necessary steps to hold a public hearing to potentially shift inside millage on February 10th, 2025 at 6 p.m. at 14155 Clarendon Shore Road, the auditorium.
So
I'm
moved.
going to make
Go
the
ahead, John.
motion.
I'll second.
JJL. Brian. Any comments? Roll call, Beth, please.
Mrs. Stone?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Manfredi?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
And Mr. Berman?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any other topics we'd like to cover? All right, then I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Brian,
I'll second.
Jody,
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Berman?
Yes.
Mr. Manfredi,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Stowe.
Yes.
Thank you for those of you who came out and endured this cold, brutal weather. Thank you for coming out tonight.